greatly enjoy. Trasa, thank you. Well, when the invitation to attend my 50-year high school class reunion popped up in my email about 6 months ago, I was surprised that my first instinct wasn't to hit the delete button. For years I had sworn that I would not attend if in fact someone actually put this event together. I had not maintained contact with any of my classmates, and there were 500 of them. And I was hard-pressed to think of anyone that I was particularly curious about, except perhaps Dora, the girl I went steady with through most of my senior year. But nonetheless, I let this email linger in my inbox for weeks. And okay, to be honest with you, I really knew the reason why I didn't want to go. And I think that was because for all of these years, I had this fear of letting my classmates see how far short I had fallen from the great expectations that I was saddled with when I graduated. I was the golden boy, student body president, state debate champion, citizen of the year, and I was even the art student of the year, if you can believe that. And as further proof of the esteem of my classmates, I was also chosen as most likely to succeed in the end of the year annual, along with my good friend and 1969 homecoming queen, Colleen Tanaka. Well, what my classmates didn't know was that the seeds of my disillusionment and collapse were already sprouting long before my graduation. Over the last 2 months of my senior year, I found myself depressed and questioning everything that I had accomplished. What had all this achievement gotten me? I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I had no idea what really gave me joy. I had simply been awfully good at snagging whatever gold rings were within my reach. The actual prizes themselves were meaningless to me. And I felt terribly alone. My classmates knew the golden boy, but they didn't know me. The only person who knew me was Dora. And she kept saying that I was so confused over and over again. And she was right. Confusion reigned. And in that year after my graduation, I broke up with Dora 3 times and finally broke her heart. I went to the University of Washington, and after 2 very lackluster years, I dropped out. I tried my darndest to become part of the counterculture, to become a hippie, right? I let my hair grow out as best I could. I marched and protested against the war. I experimented with psychedelics. And finally, in one bold and ultimately futile gesture, I sold everything I had and set off hitchhiking across the country for 6 months, alone. And I know this may sound admirable and courageous, and I suppose it was to some degree, but in truth and in hindsight, it was more of a way to glorify my absolute lostness at that time. Well, after a few years of drifting around at various jobs, I landed in a union sign shop and eventually became a journeyman sign painter. I desperately wanted to believe that I had found my calling, my joy, my place in the world. I fell in love with the idea of being a single guy, of living in the big city with a sailboat on the lake and a sports car in the garage, all while I was making great money. As an artist, no less, of sorts, well, this image of a single and hard-partying, well-off artist sustained me all through my 20s. But I knew this was not my real story. This was not me. I decided to build a house, my own house from scratch, in Puget Sound on Vashon Island. I did it, and I sold it a year later. But what did that prove? I mean, I was still chasing after these gold rings to somehow prove my value or my prowess in one way or another. It was meaningless. And then my life began to change. First, I committed myself in a way I never had before to the challenge of running a sign business. It had 7 employees, and I was responsible for providing them and their families with regular paychecks. Right? It was up to me. I had to design the work, sell the work, and keep this shop going. And they depended on me. The story was no longer about me. It was about the business and the welfare of my employees. And that changed everything. The second thing that happened, I proposed to Anita, my wife, my current wife, my only wife. I was 42 years old. It took me that long before I finally made this commitment to marriage. That commitment to allow the needs of another person to guide my choices, to make this our story instead of just my story. And it seemed that with each commitment I made, I became smaller. I became smaller. By that I mean that I was becoming less fascinated, less obsessed with myself. And perhaps this just comes with age. Or maybe as our commitments grow bigger, we just feel smaller. But in any case, I was becoming less inclined to think of me and my desires as the actual authors of a meaningful life. The Scottish philosopher Alistair MacIntyre proposed that one can only answer the question, what am I to do, if one can answer the prior question, what story am I a part of? Clearly, after years of searching, I had come to the conclusion that my story was simply not enough to bring me joy. It was Anita and her daughter's story that I had become a part of. It was my employee's story that I had become a part of. And at the age of 50, it also became a part of the story of the Unitarian Society. Your story became part of mine. And eventually, the many stories of people experiencing homelessness as well became part of my story. And here's the surprising thing. As I continue to grow smaller, I've noticed that my joy increases. Well, my first impression upon arrival at the Nile Country Club in Edmonds, Washington, 2 weeks ago, at the reunion, was shocked at how old everybody else was. After 50 years, most of my classmates were unrecognizable. And even more distressing was the realization of how very little I ever really knew about these people back in 1969. That night, I spent time with the former homecoming queen, Colleen Tanabe, and discovered for the first time that both of her parents spent all of World War II in a Japanese internment camp, and that she had a crush on me, but she couldn't date me because her parents would not allow her to date anybody who wasn't Japanese. I didn't know that. She was one of my good friends. I learned that David Niven, not the actor, David Niven, an absolute geek in high school, became a naval fighter pilot, and then was a pilot for Delta Airlines for the rest of his career, and he had this beautiful woman on his arm, and I was impressed. And I learned that Colleen Cole was one of the most energetic and fascinating people I had met in a long time. I loved talking to Colleen. And I found myself regretting all of the opportunities to share our stories that we had squandered when we were teenagers. I realized that at that time, each of us were probably so wrapped up in ourselves that there really wasn't much room for genuine curiosity about one another. And I suppose that's developmentally appropriate. But certainly from my current perspective at that reunion, we were simply strangers, sharing a general collective experience. But there's no denying that we all rocketed into our lives from a shared launch pad. And that in itself is a shared story that I'm now glad that I can embrace. I'm so glad I went to the reunion. And by the way, Dora didn't make it to the reunion. Colleen gave me her phone number, and I called her the next morning at the urging of Anita, actually. And I found out that her life had been hard. Her oldest son died when he was 18. Her younger sister and younger brother both passed away. She divorced her husband 20 years prior to the call and never remarried. And she had just retired from the bank where she had worked for 45 years. And she was living alone. And when I told her that she still remains one of the big loves of my life, she paused. And she said, "Wait a minute, Ken. Are you telling me you're about to die?" This is a hard life. And she also ended the phone call by saying, "You know, you always were confused." But I'm glad I called. Well, I don't know what else to say. I have some words, though, I'd like to share. They're from a Catholic philosopher and theologian. His name is Jean Vanier. And he described the essence of community this way. We all belong to a community of broken humanity. We all have wounded, vulnerable hearts. Each one of us needs to feel appreciated and understood. We all need help.